So there are, of course, a variety of ways to look at and consider supporting infant mental health and really supporting the family unit and not just the infant or child. Treatment always involves working with the family. Prevention is the best medicine in this case for sure. It's not always an option, but it can be very successful and also cost effective. It's always better to catch something early and not have to do as much significant treatment. But again, not always possible, and so it's important as early interventionists to catch a problem just as soon as we can. And we may not be able to prevent every problem, but we can certainly catch things and perhaps prevent them from progressing down a more negative path and put them sort of back on track. So some of the support options that have been studied are, attachment-focused approaches, including therapy, family support services from various agencies. It's important to note that if various agencies are involved, research shows that families benefit from a single case manager. It can be very burdensome, according to most families studied, to have a variety of agencies involved and to feel uncertain of who's in charge or who's really managing things, and to perhaps feel like the services are more of a burden than a help. Collaboration between agencies is key. Having one single case manager who sort of manages all that for the family can be really helpful, and keeping everybody, including the family, on the same page. Home visiting programs have been found to be very successful. Programs like Maine Families, where home visitors come in when an infant is born and work with families to identify when the baby needs help with regulating and how to do that, and how to sort of read their infant's cues and respond appropriately. Many of these parents and families may not have had that kind of parenting themselves, and it's not necessarily something that comes naturally, so that kind of home-based coaching right in the environment where they're comfortable can be very helpful. Other options include parent support groups, making sure there's access to quality childcare if that's a need. The confidence that a parent can have when their child is in a good childcare can be a real relief for a parent who's struggling in coping with a new infant or a toddler who may be having mental health or behavioral social issues. Emotional support and training is another option. What might that look like for some of the families that you work with, emotional support and training? So emotional support and training can include, of course, a variety of things depending on the family and the provider. It can include responsive care, teaching parents to respond when their baby cries and to pick them up, to give them affection and nurturing so that the babies learn to trust their parents, to help them learn ways of supporting their child's development, knowing what's typical and what's not, helping them to find support in community relationships so that they're not always going to be dependent on agencies and home visitors to help them with things, but that they might have a built-in support network in their community, whether that's at a community center, at a church, through a school. There are a variety of options there depending on the community. And to just help them to experience the joy of give and take with their children, to see that what they do actually does matter and actually does have an effect, and to really point out the positive when it's there so that they can get that boost to keep going. So these various treatments can help by, sorry, my PowerPoint froze. So these various treatments can help by reducing health risks for children and their families, by reducing healthcare costs for the community at large and for society. Can also help by breaking this cycle that we see so often in early intervention and early childhood education of poverty and mental illness. It tends to be very transgenerational, these kinds of treatments help us to break that cycle and to really present parents with a new way of thinking and a new way of relating. It's important to note that it's nearly impossible for someone to break out of these very difficult situations without some significant relationship with someone that mentors them and comes alongside them and really guides them in the process. But it can certainly be done, and it's well worth the investment. So a lot of these treatments, when you boil them down, are based on Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, that the earliest stage in an infant's development is developing trust versus mistrust. Is the child well supported, responded to, taken care of in a way that allows them to develop trust for other people, or are they neglected, not attended to in a way that they develop mistrust, which makes it very difficult for them to be successful in any part of their life. So what I'd like to look at is what this means for us locally here in Maine, because we certainly have our share of these concerns here, and we are all dealing with children in our classrooms and in our practices who may have mental health issues or high risk for mental health issues. You can see the statistics on the slide. What does this mean locally for us in Maine about the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study applied to Maine? 900 Maine children entered foster care in the past 6 years and were evaluated by the Rapid Eval Clinic at Maine General. And the results were pretty startling of the levels of abuse suffered by these foster children. And even more startling is the fact that most of these children, 37%, experienced not one, not two, but 3 or more adverse events. That means neglect, sexual abuse, and domestic violence against a parent, or physical abuse, parent imprisoned, other parent with a substance abuse problem, or even more factors than that. This is sourced from a report working with Adverse Childhood Experiences, Maine's Past, Present, and Future, that's presented by the Maine Children's Growth Council, which is a great organization, and their information is listed at the end of the presentation on the resource slides. So this report determined that only applying what we know to just those foster children, we can determine significantly higher rates of things like obesity, unwanted pregnancy, substance abuse, suicide attempts, depression as an adult. For example, it is predicted that due to these unresolved adverse childhood events, an additional 100 persons will suffer from depression as an adult. And this only looks at foster children. This isn't even looking at children who stay in the care of their biological parents but may suffer from infant mental health issues. So this really matters to Maine's future. This matters for all of us, because these children are the future of our state and of our nation. So what are some ways that you have been able to help support infant mental health in the past? Now that you know more about it, you might even be able to think of ways that you supported infant mental health or young children's mental health without even realizing it. Some of the things that I've heard classmates in the audience mention are things like having a quiet spot where children can get away to calm down when they're upset, or giving them ways to communicate and label their feelings. Helping parents learn how to co-regulate their infants is another great example. Teaching them that, they can swaddle their baby or rock their baby or sing to their baby, and those kinds of things are going to not only improve their attachment, but also improve their baby's ability to calm and to eventually learn how to calm themselves down in the future. What are the agencies that we can collaborate with in this effort, and how can we collaborate in ways that are helpful to families and not burdensome? And finally, on a bigger scale, how can we break this cycle of adverse events? What is the legislation that we need to support this? What is the funding that we need to support this? These are the kinds of things that we need to think about as professionals and to be understanding of and to be able to articulate to the families that we work with. Finally, there are 2 slides of resources at the end of your presentation. These are some great websites with a lot of information on infant mental health. Some of them provide reports or other links, email newsletters, workshops, and trainings for professionals and parents alike. I've also listed the Maine Families and the Early Head Start websites. These are programs that actually go into the home beyond early intervention to specifically give some support around infant mental health and social emotional development and bonding and attachment with parents as well in some cases. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and I hope that you will email me if you have any questions. Thank you.